Welcome to the Finsiders event. This is our second one this year. We appreciate everyone coming out for this exciting discussion on data science and financial services. We've got an outstanding panel to really take us through this. This is our first time we're actually going to record this content, so if you're not here live, you may be watching the recording later. We're really delighted that you tuned in to watch it. My name is Aubrey Hawes. I'm one of the founders and the president of Finsiders. Thank you for joining us. I want to take you through a couple of slides just to kind of talk a little bit about what we're doing. Finsiders is a nonprofit organization that puts on fintech events, but it doesn't work without all of our sponsors. So we work with lots of sponsors so there's a lot of sponsors that help sponsor this event, as well as the other events that we do throughout the year, and then the collaboration that we do with RevTech Labs for FinTech Generations, which is kind of our marquee event that we do in June. So these are everyone that helps make this event possible. Next slide, Mark. But what I also wanted to highlight is starting with this event, we're starting to collaborate with RevTech Labs Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of RevTech Labs, to really go back and help promote content, help raise awareness for fintech challenges like the ones that we're going to talk through tonight. So that's a new sort of partnership that we're doing with RevTech on their foundation side so that we can help go back and kind of expand the message around what we do. Next, as we're getting towards our really second marquee event that Finsiders does, is what we call our Finsiders Awards, where we recognize 4 different awards, one for best innovation, so really coming up with what is the best idea that we see. Second one is a community organizer that we named for Dan Roselli, who's one of the founders of RevTech Labs. A fail fast or a risk taker award. Who is really willing to go out there and take risk? And last is the change champion. And Q4 is when we start to solicit nominations for the awards. So if you're attending here, if you're watching this, look at finsiders.org so that we can go back and get your nominations in. The next slide is we want to get those nominations in, and then in January. Last year we did it in March because we didn't want to have a virtual event, our virtual awards event. EY hosts us at the Wave Space in South End to give out those awards. We had about 40 people. It was great to kind of be back in person. So that is going to be the plan. So be thinking about who those nominations are and get them in. Go forward, Mark. And part of just to get the creative juices going to kind of give you a view of who has won in the past. These are our past winners. So this year will be our 7th year that we've actually done this. And I think you'll see in the crowd here some winners. So Jenna won last year. Her day job is Bank of America. Go forward, Mark. I'm not going to talk through each one of these. Derek Wang, who's actually one of our panelists here on data science, actually won for best innovation for Stratified. So that was actually outstanding from there. Change champion, so Dante Wilson, and I would actually say that was our most successful viral campaign. He got nominated, couldn't make the awards, but he gave us a video to really celebrate him winning. And within the next week, he got promoted to run the consumer bank. And everyone from Truist, all the Truist executives were resharing, thank you to Finsiders. So that was really our most viral campaign that we've done. And then last is the Dan Roselli Community Organizer Award. We've had really a lot of great sort of award winners. Last year was Nick Williams for all of the work he does on PayCLT. And he does a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes and has collaborated with us on things like other fintech education events. So with that, the last announcement I have before we bring up our panel today on data science and financial services is Venture 135, which is the biggest sort of venture conference in the Southeast. It's going to be in Charlotte, and November 15 and 16s at Barings World Headquarters. Go to Venture 135 to order your tickets. This is not a free event. This event that you're at now is, but this is put on by RevTech Labs. So if you're interested in the community, come out and support it. With that, that's enough announcements. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring Mark up on stage. There's also a Finsiders board member, our current treasurer, to really introduce the panel. Yeah, I'll sit there.
Awesome. Thank you, Aubrey. And we really appreciate the opportunity here at AvidXchange to use their facility. They've been certainly a true collaborator and partner here in the Charlotte area, in encouraging fintechs, encouraging the community here, and certainly our Finsiders community. Our first panelist is Derek Wang. Derek Wang studied, come on up, Derek. Derek Wang studied data science, data analytics, and the such at UNCC as a PhD, and then founded Stratified. Welcome, Derek. Next up is Chris Conlon. Chris Conlon founded Conlon Scientific, actually moved his family and business here to the Charlotte area from DC. We appreciate you being here, Chris. Next is Tim Eastridge. Hey, Tim, thanks for being here. Tim founded Eastridge Analytics. Has been in Charlotte for how long? 8 years, fantastic. Has significant experience applying data science to industry, particularly financial services, et cetera, and founded Eastridge Analytics, where he's helping explainable machine learning, so taking machine learning models and creating explainable models so that auditors and financial institutions that are applying their models, you can't just say, hey, this is a black box solution, the machines figured it out. You actually have to be able to explain the models to our regulators. And last up is Khalil Khouy with Sia Partners. Khalil, thanks for being here. Khalil is also an expert in data science and applying data science as a expert at Sia Partners in the financial services industry. There we go. First up, Khalil, tell us a little more about what you do at Sia Partners.
So, hi everyone, thank you for having me today. My name is Khalil Khouy, and I've been with Sia Partners for about 4 years now, and I'm currently a data science manager. Actually, it's one of the programs that Aubrey was involved in originally in terms of data challenges and hackathons that enabled me to meet with Sia Partners leaders as a hackathon participant, and that's how I'm here today. So I do appreciate the value of these events organized by the fintech ecosystem here in Charlotte. They definitely drive growth within talent. So what I currently do as a data science team member at the Sia Partners is basically looking into problems that current local clients as well as national clients currently going through. I'm talking about financial service clients within financial services, and we're trying to help them basically find a optimized solution using data science along with design thinking approach, more proactive approach, if you will. That's the bottom line. Sometimes we get to use some of our AI solutions that we have developed in our HECA AI ecosystem, and then sometimes we get to customize some of those solutions for our financial services, and we get to partner with a lot of third-party vendors as well.
Awesome. Khalil, thank you. Tim, tell us a little bit about your company.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tim Eastridge. Thanks for having me here today. My company's name is Eastridge Analytics, LLC, and it has been incorporated for about 2 years now. We specialize in data science analytics, and we do revenue forecasting, fraud detection, and any number of things regarding big data and using advanced statistics to help explain what's happening in your data and help make better decisions using your data.
Perfect. Thank you. Chris, tell us about Conlon Scientific.
Hey there, my name is Chris Conlon. I've been running Conlon Scientific since 2015. We are a services company and we use machine learning to uncover high performance investment opportunities for our clients. We're talking hedge funds picking stocks, banks making loans. Anytime where you can develop a custom machine learning model to help some company discover how to make better investments, that's when we get involved. We recently moved to the Charlotte area just about a year ago now. Me, my wife, all of our employees moved with us, which has been incredible. And we moved from the DC area and we want to continue to grow our business in Charlotte. We think it's a place to be.
Awesome. Welcome. And Derek, tell us about Stratified and what your new role is, and tell us a bit about the challenges that Stratified's been focused on.
Yeah, so my name is Derek, founder and chairman of Stratified. And in terms of what Stratified does in AI for enterprise, we focus on the customer experience side to help organizations have more competitive advantage when they're facing other fintech competitors, understand your customer better, both from your call centers to all your media coverage and et cetera. One of the core that we have been experimenting and implementing for years is in natural language processing, natural language understanding, that extend to other areas of machine learning as well. As I was happily transitioned to a non-operating role this year, I've been more focusing on looking at the entire landscape via my investment capital, DW Capital in the city, where I'm looking at helping startups as well, working with local like Rev Labs, working with other investment vehicles to identify new entities that we can help foster the Charlotte ecosystem. And that's what I've been primarily working on these days. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Derek, thanks for being here. So starting with you, what's a common use case in the financial services market, financial services area that your company and your team has helped address and solve?
Yeah, I think from our area of looking at this, AI could play two side of roles. One is to identify potential sales opportunities by looking into existing database for their customers, customer interactions, and et cetera. Running parallel is to improve their operational efficiency based on looking at call centers, each agent's, their audio files, and identify what are the areas that question they answered, what are specific questions they cannot answer, and then refreshing their entire knowledge base on the near real time, right? Hourly basis, 6-hour basis, et cetera. But if you think about that, from each agent, and you amass them to 3,000, 4,000 agents each organization have, and you save each agent 5-10 minutes in terms of their first call resolution, that's a huge improvement for the operational cost for the organization in the millions that they're counting. So both the rev side and the kind of customer retention side is where Stratify has been designed and implemented into helping organizations. And one of the areas that we have seen success is for Fortune 2000 and above organizations that really has the need to keep their customer, to keep identifying new customers and retaining them. But more and more so, what interests me right now is how can we bring the AI or the experience we have gained from the AI to one level down into the market, to the general market where you maybe only have 10, 20 customer agents, you maybe have, sub 5, 6, 10 million revenue. How could AI in natural language processing or understanding to help them improve their revenues and their retention? And that's where maybe not, I can't talk about stratified strategies, but that's an area where I think has a huge potential in the fintech side, even smaller banks, credit unions, those are a community or a market sector, the light hasn't been shined on yet.
Excellent. Chris, how about from your vantage point, what are the common challenges that your company helps financial institutions solve?
Like I said, we're helping people uncover high-performance investment opportunities. So we might quite plainly have a hedge fund approach us, and that hedge fund says, we're trying to win in the commodity space, we're trying to win in the stock market space, we're trying to win in oils, metals, anything. And we will look at their previous investments, we'll look at their past performance, we'll look at any data that they've come up with so far, and then we will help them win that war of mathematics on the public market. We get involved in a lot of crazy projects as a result, but that's the foundation of it. That's why people bring us on board. That's why companies involved in public markets will reach across the country to hire us specifically, is because that's where we specialize. And after a while, sometimes we sort of become the sole source technology shop for those businesses. And those are amazing partners that we're happy to do everything we can to support them. But where we specialize is sort of hacking the public markets.
When they come with the ask of help us win, what's your biggest obstacle? Is it easy to access the data, or is the data generally hard to get your hands on, but once you get your hands on it, then it's smooth sailing from there? What's your biggest challenge?
You mentioned data acquisition as a potential challenge, data collection and data engineering. How do I build my source data for a problem that lives and dies in the public markets?
Data cleanliness.
Yep. Part of our specialty is having the hookups for those data sources. I have a messy and complex relationship with a number of data vendors. I know exactly what they're good at and exactly what type of data they sell at a good value. And I know what data that they sell at a terrible value, and I know what products I'm never going to touch. As a result of all that accumulated experience, we have a small data center. We have some small supercomputers in our office. We have a data warehouse of all this information just sitting around. We're constantly grooming and maintaining the good quality public market financial data so that when our clients come to us trying to solve these problems, we've already solved 80% of the data engineering work for them.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim, same deal. What's major use case do you help solve?
Yeah, so Eastridge Analytics' expertise is in fraud detection and an emerging fintech technology of graph databases. So, for example, Neo4j is a graph database that specializes in connecting the dots, if you will. So in data sets where the relationships between entities is just as important as the data point itself, it's a good opportunity to use a graph database. So we have had a lot of success with fraud detection. And if you can imagine a large spider web of all of the clients and their transactions and their shared phone numbers, emails, things like this, you can stitch together a network and then run statistics and unsupervised machine learning, supervised machine learning, and all of these things to assist the stakeholders to make better decisions and prioritize the most important networks. So that's one of our key areas of focus right now.
And there's significant advantage over a traditional data model. Why is that? Why is a GraphQL graph database more advantageous than a standard database?
Yeah, absolutely. So a graph database is technically a NoSQL database, and it actually stores the data in this graphical structure, which enables you to query the connections much more quickly than you might be able to do in a relational database. So there's certainly a speed component, thousands of times faster in situations where you have millions of nodes. And also there are built-in graph database, data science tools within the database itself. So instead of porting your data from a database into Python, you can actually run these algorithms within the database itself, which is a huge value add as well.
Real world data isn't commonly structured.
Right, and there's a lot of it.
Khalil, what challenges in the industry do you see?
So from a consulting standpoint, our clients within financial services, they have a lot of data capture issues as well as customer data remediation issues. So that's what we get most frequently, to basically look at how we can optimize those enhancements, if you will, to their data capture. Large financial institutions still have a lot of legacy systems that don't speak to each other. Trying to put this in layman terms, if you will, and that creates a data capture issue or lag, if you will. So that's where we come in to actually help with that process. And then from a customer data quality, we've seen recently that a lot of financial institutions have been paying a lot of attention to that, because obviously in the fintech world there's a lot of disruptors that are able to utilize big data more efficiently and much more fluidly, if you will. So they ask us to explore and try to design approaches that for these large institutions to help them optimize their processes and also compete with fintech stuff.
Khalil, how do we educate our business partners? We're not all data scientists. We're not all familiar with these concepts of machine learning, data science, deep data analytics, and the such, but it's important for our business partners to really understand there's power, there's efficiency. How do we do that?
Absolutely. So there are always opportunities for open forums to actually create data literacy communities, if you will, that involve both the service provider or the financial institution as well as the customer. I think customers and financial institutions should be optimizing or working on enhancing their business partnership. It should be an efficient business partnership, because when making the product or the service more customer-centric, that's the highest reward for both sides, right? And then also, that's what the regulators are looking for. That's what they're driving. They're trying to drive that efficiency in terms of that relationship between the customer and financial services institution. So there's definitely a need to basically focus on data literacy within the organization for the employees, as well as creating some open forums for the customers as well, to help them get educated about the data that they're sharing.
Derek, do you see that as a challenge as well? You as owner of a product company, founder of a product company, is education of your clients an important part?
Yeah, Mark, I think that's, for years we've been working on this, from the university times to the time as stratified and even post-stratified. I think it had been, and it is, and it will be a challenge within the organization. I agree with Cleo about the data literacy sector of this. There's a lot of education needs to be done. However, I grew to the realization of, at some point, it may not be doing that, right? So it really depends on how far your AI or your data science or ML go towards the business end. why I'm saying that is every business when people doing their decision making, AIs and MLs are become evidence that to support how they can do the decision. And AI MLs are ultimately not making that decision for any organization or any people in that organization. Where it comes in this special layer, which for years has been great position data scientists or data engineers, whatever that the titles are already, they have the knack or specialty in translating what the data is trying to say, what's the AI result is trying to say. I think that become a specialty job or a filling the gap almost. Once they earn the trust for the organization, their biggest knowledge is to understand where this business wants to go, and then to use the AI or ML or whatever technology it does to see whether that fits into the organizational direction and helping translating and making recommendations to the decision makers, right? So if we follow that line, where I start seeing more is you got a fundamental tech layer, you got a human interpreted layer that is sitting in the middle, then you have the decision layer where sitting on top of that, and it become a ecosystem that is humming as far as I can see in a good organization right now. And you need to have all, like I'm simplifying to 3 layers, but you need to have all 3 there for any of the AI projects or AI initiatives to be successful, data science to be successful in the fintech. And that's one area. And the other part of this is that middle layer brings the accountability, like Leo said, right? The accountability for regulatory point of view for anything there. Again, AI is a outcome. It's not a decision. So they need somebody to safeguarding it and et cetera. But I do agree that point.
Chris, speaking of accountability, from a regulatory perspective, your industry and your focus area is certainly highly regulated. How do you ensure that the models feed into that, tie into that, are either explainable or not just a black box, the machines did it? How do you adhere to regulatory requirements?
I think that this fascination with explainability and accountability and transparency of AI models is a side effect of people's fascination with black box models like neural networks. I can show you with a pen and paper with just plain math and calculus that you should not be using neural networks for almost every financial data application I can conceive of. You should be using things that rely on decision trees as their base. Well, the decision tree models, ensembles of decision trees, anything that works off of decision trees, it trivializes the accountability and explainability problem because everyone knows how to read a decision tree. Even if your model is a collection of 1,000 decision trees, an auditor can read 20 of them and then be pretty confident that your model is not being biased. So I think in finance, we have the fortunate ability to sort of sidestep this problem by using models that have a high level of transparency and explainability, like decision trees, like linear models, because it's what tends to work for our data.
Indeed. Tim, you've got a product that helps to explain perhaps in English, but do you have a similar view or augmented view?
I see where Chris is coming from. I think it depends on the situation. So I developed a program that uses a data mining application to automatically create all of the possible patterns in your data and mash them up and figure out which of these patterns are the most impactful for your data set, and then explain in plain English why we think that this data mining routine applies best for this prediction. And in situations like fraud detection, this is really important because you have highly imbalanced data. So if you imagine for some of these large financial institutions, you have billions of transactions, and it's highly imbalanced because of just a small percentage of those are fraud. And so these data mining exercises where you generate multiple flags and risk features and you combine them to understand what's going on, it's really important to really get a full picture of why you're recommending a certain group or a certain individual be recommended for further investigation.
Derek?
I just want to add to this. I think, like to Chris and Tim's point, they're not in conflict, right? In fintech, I think it's a parallel. You need both. One is explainable models like decision trees or taxonomies or whatever. Those are very helpful when you know what to monitor, right? Because that's built on your prior knowledge of the industry. That's where you can lay it out. But also in the area where Tim's saying is, in a fraud, in a network analysis, in anomaly detection, many of those are like to look into the unknowns. When trying to look into unknowns, technology like unsupervised learning and all this will become very useful in dealing with those type of problems. And fundamentally, whether it's neural net or whatever Bayesian model, whatever those fundamental techniques, almost irrelevant because they will be changed and adapted. But then the schools of supervised, which means you know what you would know, and monitor, unsupervised, looking into the unknown, are both equivalently important. And I think it's very situational. So give you an example in our area where when we talk about experience-driven process, people have huge taxonomies. Like it's a decision tree or they call them the talk track, right? They will follow that and monitor and knowing what's going on, but they still want to use Bayesian neural network to see, hey, what may be the new topic that pops up that they need to retrain their agents. And those things are, if you build it that way, they can live in concert and help the organization get better. I do not believe it's one or the other. It's very situational in this sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as you were mentioning the anomaly detection, Eastridge Analytics will actually develop graph-based neural networks that use convolutional neural networks on a graph structure. And this is an interesting approach that is similar to a dimensionality reduction, where you can learn the structure of the graph and reduce that structure into a vector. And this allows you to run additional algorithms that otherwise wouldn't be possible in this data set. So that would be one example where a neural network could be leveraged on a graph.
So I'd like to add to what my colleagues here mentioned, is that it is actually a case-by-case scenario, whether you should be using supervised techniques or unsupervised techniques. The way I see it, just my personal opinion, when it has to do with customer benefits, if you will, or something that has to do with like revenue optimization that also lead to benefiting the customer somehow. I think sometimes it's better to use supervised techniques. That way the customer would understand exactly how is that business model or profit model built, right? Is it benefiting the customer more than the client, or is it like than the service provider, or is it equally benefiting the customer and the service provider? But in the cases of like fraud detection or anomaly detection, I would go with unsupervised techniques because we're basically trying to look into the unknown. There's a lot of unknowns, and obviously there's different dimensions that we need to look into for those anomalies.
How do your clients, or how does the recipients of these techniques, these benefits, how do they sustain it? Is it just set the model up and let it just evolve, or do you have controls? Do you need to advise on controls before and after?
I thought you would answer this question because you run a sales company. Do you sustain the model? How do you productionize it? ML ops has become a buzzword. Now it's the latest job description that's out there.
Everything needs an ops on the end.
Everything needs an ops. It's a job title just for what you're describing. structure the data before you retrain it, or structure the data before you train the model. I think that sustainability is not about models evolving and AIs being sort of an amorphous Skynet-like blob that learns and trains over time. I think the issue of sustaining and productionizing models has to do with your ability to write your machine learning research like a computer scientist would. Write it like a real computer programmer would to a really high level of software quality, and then retrain it as often as you want. I think a lot of the issues that data scientists have with productionizing their models has to do with a failure to produce reproducible research.
Khalil?
I agree to a certain extent. So I'm a PhD student currently, right? So, but I personally think that, and again, I'm saying personally because this is my personal opinion based on what I've seen so far, and obviously there's a lot of relevant work that's been done before, is that it depends on the data. So every model, the way I see it, every model is as good as the data it's being fed. And that touches on bias in the data modeling phase of the actual AI tool or model. That touches on so many different aspects, right? Again, every model is as good as the data it's being fed. And that's my perspective.
Is that right?
No, I think that's that. Well, in my opinion too, that's right. It's data is the foundation. But I think to answer your question in a more business point of view, right? I mean, like again, I think all the data and models are tools for organization to use. What I've grown fond of thinking about this is how a financial services company, number one, grow trust into whatever the model outputs are in whatever area use cases are, because the AI impacts will be in a variety of use cases for organization. Secondarily, do they need to constantly adjusting the model, adjusting the data, adjusting the human readouts of the data? I think it's a yes to all three, not just changing the data, feeding different things. Like if we're talking about deterministic or models there, you probably need to adjust it on a very regular basis. To your point, hey, how are we changing the taxonomy? How are we changing the decision tree and et cetera? There's a human intervention to that all the time. And third is, how are they going to read out the model outputs? It's going to change situationally based on their business-driven processes. So agree with Chris, right? AI ops or whatever we call it. I started an AI company, but I believe the human need to be in the center of any AI company, because otherwise it's not a fortune teller. The machine itself, again, I fundamentally don't believe the machine itself can tell you a result. The machine itself is providing you evidence, to providing you unbiased facts to the most case, but many times it's biased. Human need to be in the loop. Human is not there just to supervise it, but more so is to trying to interpret what is going on there. And the last comment back down in this is, we are not talking about black box AI. I mean, black box AI not even in FinServ, in many areas does not really apply. People don't really want to take the chances of believing what it is. We are talking about MLs and AIs that were generating interpretable, maybe not explainable, results that business can take and use it for their decisions. So I do believe there is a human factor in this.
We've mentioned the word bias in the data, and the data is important, but in the real world, data is imperfect, et cetera. But what is the data bias, and what is the challenge? What problems are created? How do we address that? Tim, you want to start?
Well, sure. And I was just going to touch on the last
Sure.
topic real quick as well, because you brought up a good point about the data and then the business requirements as well. And so in my experience working with clients, the business requirements plays as important of a role as the data changing in the first place. So it depends, right? It always depends. And in a situation where sometimes you can build a model that is a simply heuristic SQL statement, and you need to compare the accuracy of this more simplistic approach with maybe a more sophisticated gradient boosted model, for example, where MLOps would be required for gradient boosted models. You can get a SQL statement into production much more quickly. And so I've had experience in the past getting more simplistic models into production using a more heuristic approach. So it depends on what you call ML and AI, right? But it also depends on the business requirements. Bias was the next question. Do you want to touch a little bit on bias, or?
So we're talking about bias in data or algorithmic bias.
Well, I think data is produced by us humans, and there's innate natural bias there. I'm just curious about when we mention bias multiple times, we've got to work that out of the system, or how do we monitor it? How do, what is it, and why is that a problem?
Sure. So so bias in data, to your point, actually does come from us humans. So far per my research, that's what I've been looking into. Obviously, we're, as humans, are different characters, different beliefs, and that can actually lead to some sort of biases in terms of our interactions, right? And when I say interactions, that translates into the data that we are sharing, right? With all these different platforms, right? That's being collected on us. So there is that type of data bias. And then there's the bias that's in data that's basically used somehow, I would say, against the benefit of the customer, if you will, and that there is a pattern. Obviously, if we look at all the regulatory enforcements, by the feds, vis-a-vis some of the financial models, if you will, right? That obviously shows some bias there in terms of like using, I would say, zip codes that obviously translate into income per capita. For low income per capita zip codes, for example. So that kind of data element can be actually sometimes used against the customer goal or objective in that specific. So that's just an example. I'm not generalizing, obviously, but again, I'm gonna say that again. Every AI model is as good as the data it's being fed.
I can share a funny story around this.
Yes.
I've been in the consumer lending space for 7 or 8 years. We operate in the consumer lending space, like I said, uncovering high-performance investment opportunities. Sometimes that involves making a really high-risk loan to someone or to a group of people. So multiple different businesses, different clients have all tried to crack this subprime or low credit score lending problem to consumers. Every single time, the most meaningless variable in terms of whether someone is going to pay back a loan is their income.
And that's for the model that you've looked at, right? Specifically.
Yeah.
For the bank, for the financial institution that.
Yeah. So we can, simple example, train a forest model on some of this consumer lending data, and we can look at the feature importances, which just tell you, what mattered, what made this model, if it was accurate at all, what made it accurate. I swear income is always at the bottom of the list. Credit scores are pretty low too. Credit scores are a bad idea, but it's amazing that the income doesn't matter. Credit scores are pretty bad, but they do something, and I can usually find 5 more things that are more important than both of those. So I think we talk about eliminating bias in ML models all the time, and the bias that appears naturally in data all the time. It's to the benefit of everyone involved, both the lender and the consumer, to not care about those things that don't matter.
So I'd like to actually respond to that. I mean, it's actually great to see that there is there's models out there that don't take income in consideration in their financial decisioning, right? So that's good. That's a good change. But I'll give an example of an actual financial, would say, disruptor, Upstart. If anyone is familiar with Upstart, they actually partnered CFPB to use alternate data or alternative data and to be able to actually issue loans for customers. And I believe, if I can recall, last year they actually, in terms of their lending expectation, I mean, they actually, I believe they beat some of the largest financial institutions expectations in terms of actually creating lending opportunities. So that's just an example of like a good collaboration in terms of, having defining those business requirements from a customer perspective and making the model more customer-centric or more client-centric, because obviously we all know CFPB has a huge forum for everyone. Every consumer is allowed to submit a complaint, ticket, for a variety of reasons from a financial standpoint, from a financial consumer standpoint. So that data aggregation, that all of that data is being shared with financial disruptors such as Upstart, and it's working.
Yeah, no, I just want to follow that, and I think just turn the table around. I think, number one, from my opinion, we would never be able to eliminate bias. Bias is always there. You have data bias, you will have model bias. However, for a business to think about this is, what is the tolerance? What is your boundary of error that you can operate within? So I was a scientist before, where I always think about model first, business decision second. But more and more as I engage with the companies, my viewpoint changed to the point where saying business first. Because every business, even without AI, looking at how business operates, people are always doing risky things. It's just, how risky can you go? What's the boundary you want it to be? And then they go back to let whatever they call data to support their decision. If that's within their confine, they will do it. I don't think AI or ML will change that for businesses, in my opinion. So then the point back is not about whether we can eliminate bias, is how can we expose biases in that data set to the decision maker, just like explainable AIs or any form or shape, to expose that level of biases for when people trying to make a decision, they will see, oh, okay, income. Fun story indeed. Hey, we probably don't care because this year we just want to aggressively grow by 30% of like my customer base, whatever it is, let's go all out, right? What the income is doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It's what that level of bias that exposed and transparently described to the end user become key. Every business is gonna act on a biased outputs anyways. When we talk, is already biased. right? So fundamentals, I think it's a different way of looking at it. And that different perspective will foster different companies, like you say, Upstart, all this Greenlight and all these companies coming out. It's a different perspective, I think.
Interesting. Changing subjects. Fraud, Tim, you've got quite a bit of experience in fraud. And we've got a few minutes. I'm thinking we'll dive into this topic, and then if we have a couple questions from the audience, we'll do that and try to wrap up in 10 minutes. But around fraud, how do you combat fraud? And don't the fraudsters have the same tools? Is it just constantly evolving?
Yeah, first question. So how do we take on fraud, right? So I think the biggest thing that fintechs can think about in taking on fraud is to get away from a customer-centric view of fraud. Right now there are a lot of questions and typologies and business logic written around what is this one customer doing? Are they withdrawing a lot of money? Are they sending money to certain regions of the world? And it might send a red flag and write a suspicious activity report to the government, right? But if you think about fraud in a more holistic view, you have multiple people who are working together, criminal networks, that are very difficult for our standard relational databases to pick up on. And so I think there's opportunity for the fintech space to disrupt the fraud analytics by using things like graph technology that are designed, and using the right tool for the job, right? Designed to piece together all the different disparate data points and try to paint a picture of what's really going on in the data. So I think that's probably the biggest disruptor I see in that space.
Brilliant. Khalil, do your clients see challenges here in fraud?
Yes, and I agree to Tim's point. So
Yeah.
fraud is a huge area of opportunity for AI to basically find a lot. Actually does favor of financial services providers as well as funds. That's a perfect there where whether it's a explainable or not, hey, this model is actually working in favor. Actually, it sucks, right? No one wants their account hacked anyway, regardless of whether they actually understand the model or not. Nobody wants to go to dinner at 8 p.m. tonight and then realize that account is overdrawn. Fraudulent events, right? At that moment, the customer doesn't care about explainability. The customer cares about resolution.
I think if the fraudsters focus their energy on doing good, they could probably make a more significant impact for themselves and for the world. Chris, any thoughts or ideas around fraud?
These guys have it covered.
With that?
These two have it covered.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one more thought to this is if you think about how the money flows in the data, you might have multiple actors working together to move funds around. And if the bank sees that there might be cash structuring, then they can send a suspicious activity report. But what they're limited on is they're just looking at that one person. So if you think about it in terms of the whole community together, that's the way that the fraudsters think about it, right? And in our current data structures, it's very difficult for us to mine those connections when you have, again, billions of records to do multiple hops. But that's where this emerging technology of graph databases can play a role to piece together those disparate data points.
Are there any questions in the audience? Teresa. Yeah. Or I can repeat it.
I have two questions, but I'm going to pose this first one because I'm in risk, third-party risk specifically, and I'm constantly looking for ways to have a holistic view of a third party or also your vendor inventory as a whole. So I'm listening to all of the ways you do modeling, and I don't know if this is a good use case, but I'm thinking, do you think there's a way to create something in your world that would give that view? You've got BitSight, you've got Risk Recon, companies like that that hone in on technology and InfoSec, but then you've got fraud, you've got privacy, and you've got physical security. Well, physical security is different, but all these other domains of risk that we have to put together to get a holistic view. I don't know if it would be cost effective. Do you think that's something that data and modeling, data science could get to eventually? Understanding this is highly regulated, you've got OCC, you've got Fed, you've got all those requirements, but it's a very overbearing process, and companies spend lots of money just overseeing third-party risk. Any thoughts?
Who wants to take that one? Tim.
I can start. So third-party risk is notoriously challenging, right? Because it's not one of your customers, but you're still on the hook for your behaviors. So recently, I was involved in using analytics to look for Russia sanctions evasion, right? Because even though the client was not directly banking with these individuals, we still needed to know what the exposure was for the client, right? And so it's in a way, it's not so much machine learning and AI, it's just a big data problem, because it's so much information, and sometimes you have 4, 5, 6 hops from the initial transaction to the time that the trade settles. And if you need to know that you have exposure halfway through, that's a really tricky data problem. So again, we used graph analytics to tackle this approach and try to find the number of hops away from our customers and our counterparties, and understanding where that risk might occur. You can also use some algorithms like unsupervised machine learning to kind of group these customers together. So if you have IP address, for example, or other information that you can purchase from third-party vendors to understand more about the third-party risk, then you can try to cluster those entities together and take a look at the data and from that perspective as well.
Excellent. Anyone else? Take a shot at that one. Kevin, Khalil?
I just want to add to what Tim, real quick, I just want to add to what Tim just shared, that actually graph analytics actually work, in terms of all those SOOs and SORs, right, that you have, and trying to aggregating everything, all those data sources, if you will, right? I understand legacy systems sometimes don't speak to each other, and that can be a huge burden that could be character building for your team, right? So having some sort of it will be like a baby steps kind of, right? Like starting with creating some sort of a data lab, if you will, right? And then moving into like a smart data mart, if you will, right? Like automating that data feed, if you will, right? In terms of like regulatory requirements and implementing some, utilizing some APIs. There's a lot of APIs out there, and I understand some public APIs you have to go through compliance and legal to actually prove them and all that. But those baby steps, very important, because they build the foundation for what comes next, right? Because as a bigger financial service institution, there's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through to actually get everything, which is understandable, but quick wins don't last long, right? So we have to look long term, right? Baby steps, yeah.
Evan has a question?
Yeah. So I want to beat Chris's dead horse a little bit more. Going back and thinking about the concept of black box modeling, et cetera, where does model explainability from why we're doing it, how we're doing it, the outcome of the model, right? When is that not good enough versus getting into model interoperability, which is how does this model work? How did it get to the decision that it came to? Like, how do you separate the two to be able to still use some of those more advanced models in the financial services, making people comfortable without having to get into the actual underlying model itself?
That's a great question. A lot of times when machine learning engineers will refer to a model as black box, they might not fully understand how it works or how simple it actually is under the hood. That is to say that the model is black box to the engineer, but not black box in actuality. For example, there are numerous algorithms that rely on jumbling up or ensembling or combining a ton of decision trees, many different algorithms like that. If you understand how those algorithms work at an intuitive level, you can produce something that an auditor will understand and be satisfied with. If you understand the way that the trees vote, understand the way the trees average, understand the way they branch and interact with each other, I guarantee that you can produce something that an auditor will understand and be able to digest. I really only see black box models being truly black box in the neural net space, in the NLP space, in the networks of transformer space.
And that's what I'm referring to. Can you bring model explainability to the outcome you got without having to get into interoperability of that model to still clear it with?
Yeah, something that I've done really often that I don't understand why it's not done more often is what I call rainbow charts, rainbow tables. This is kind of a term stolen from the cybersecurity world. Say that you train a huge complicated neural net and you need to explain to someone why and how different variables affect the outcomes. Take the average row in your data set, the average observation. If your data set's a bunch of people, take the most average person that shares the most characteristics with so many other people. Adjust one variable. Say it's the credit score, for example. Adjust one variable like the credit score from 300 all the way to 850 on that average person and watch how the outcome changes. Do that for 20 more people that are kind of similar to that average person, but not exactly the same. It starts to look like a rainbow table. And I've used that as sort of a backstop to satisfy the need for auditability or explainability in the scenario where you are in fact relying on a fully black box model.
I agree with Chris. There is no consensus in the scientific community on what definition of a black box model yet is, right? And regulators right now are coming out with these sort of invitations, inviting financial services institutions, to actually look into explainability of their models, right? But again, the scientific community, I don't think there is a consensus yet on the understanding of what is an explainable model, what is a black box model. So, but definitely agree with Chris. There shouldn't be my personal take on it. There shouldn't be a trade-off between explainability and interpretability, right, or accuracy. There shouldn't be like any trade-off, because to Chris' earlier point about neural networks, they can actually be decision trees. There is an actual research paper that actually proved that point, right? So, and it basically kept the accuracy intact when converting a neural network model to a decision tree. So.
Excellent. Great. Tim?
I just want to add one more thing. So like you said, there is kind of a spectrum right now. The more interpretable, more explainable, typically you have lower accuracy, right? So that's kind of the trade-off right now, currently. Now, one of the benefits of using a fully explainable model where you have a plain English explanation, we predict this, and here's the exact reason why, here's the p-values and lift scores and things like this, is the root cause analysis. So one of the reasons I started building an explainable model in the first place was to answer the question of, great, thank you for your prediction, but why are you predicting this, right? Like the application was to predict which trades were going to fail to deliver to the client on time. So I built a model, and it was, I thought it was very strong. And the stakeholder was like, great, but why is this happening? And I kind of shrugged my shoulders. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I can get back to you on that. And then, 4 years later, I had a model that that could explain the prediction. So that's kind of one of the benefits of a more explainable while potentially a little bit less accurate.
Makes sense. Derek, Chris, Tim, Khalil, thank you guys. We really appreciate it. Avid Exchange, thank you for letting the Finsiders be here.